Welcome to the Expert's Journey podcast, where we're all about creating your path to impact. Join your hosts, Dixie Mary Carlton from Indie Expert Publishing and Mr. Web Marketing Brad Houck, as we look at how you can grow your business and influence by leveraging your knowledge for profit. Hey, welcome to the Expert's Journeys podcast. In this episode, Dixie and myself will be discussing what can go wrong when you're trying to build your business. Life's never smooth and you're going to encounter some bumps and humps in the road. So how do you handle them? And today we're going to look at a whole pile of things and you're going to see some perfect examples of this. Good morning, Dixie.
Good morning, Brad. And I know that you've started your day out badly. I'm starting my day out living in a construction zone. There is so much that has gone wrong for both of us in the last couple of weeks, whether it's Zoom sessions and technology or power cuts. Let's just have a commiserate and share session with people that are listening, because we know that this is a constant thing for all of us who work the way we do. It just doesn't always go to plan. I've heard about stars falling off stages and events being cancelled and flights just not working out. It's exhausting.
Exactly. So much going on. And nothing ever runs smoothly. And when it does, I suppose I'm used to dealing with, disasters. So I'm like, well, what's going to go wrong? Because things are too smooth now. And call me a pessimist, but I've learned that when things get too smooth, something's about to kick me in the backside.
This is right. You work as a fireman, right? So you are used to dealing with flooding, fires, accidents, things that just don't go wrong on a much bigger scale than most of us. Tell us about the last 10 days with Cyclone Alfred and all the things that's brought in for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, working on your business, getting out there, doing stuff. I mean, I managed to, get a new book out, which was great.
Awesome.
It arrived after the cyclone. But yeah, suddenly we got, the cyclone coming down the coast. And for those people who are overseas, a cyclone is a hurricane or a typhoon, same thing. And it was coming down at around category 4, which is winds up to 250 kilometers an hour, lots of rain, etc. And it was going to coming down the coast, and then it was going to swing in and come straight in on the capital city of Queensland, which is Brisbane, and Gold Coast, where I live. And we were on the southern side of it, which is the wet side, because they rotate clockwise and they pull all the water, and the winds are on the southern side. So as, a volunteer firefighter running a fire station, we're prepping for cleanup, flood recovery, all those sorts of things. And anyway, this cyclone took its time. It did a couple of loops. It kind of came in and then did a loop and went back, and then did another loop and went back, and eventually it got on shore, and it ended up coming on shore at around Cat 1, which is great. That's not bad. The problem was that the winds before it even got here were well up over 100 kilometers an hour. So even before the cyclone got here, we had trees down. The trees took out the power, and that led to, where I am here, 10 days without power. Now, luckily I had done some prep, but not having power, even when you have a generator, it changes everything. Just everything is much harder to do.
Wow. Absolutely.
And obviously, we've had thousands of trees down. There was the biggest outage of electricity in Queensland, and I was out there, cutting trees off people's driveways so they could get out, cutting trees off roads, and not being able to cut other trees because there was power lines tied up in them, of course. And it was just a lot of work. So running command and control with the IC, team, and then looking after my own firefighters, and then my own family and my own house. And we do have a creek down the back, which can flood. So we went from kind of high winds to high winds and rain, and then possible flooding. And it was just stress after stress after stress. And trying to get any work done was just quite impossible, quite frankly. I mean, the best I could do was a social media post. My mind totally filled with what could happen, what is happening, what's happening over there, how's my family doing, all these things. And yeah, it was just
and it's exhausting,
mind-numbing.
Isn't it? It is not only mind-numbing, it's exhausting. And we were just talking before we started the session today, when you are going through these things and then the worst of it is over, that seems to be when the exhaustion hits. And it doesn't matter what you do. It's really hard to bring yourself back up. You literally just have to stop, be kind to your body and yourself, and just say, I need to take time out. And if you're a speaker, and we both know that this happens a lot, if you're a speaker and you have to go on, the show must go on. What do we do in those instances? Like sometimes, and we all know the stories of the flights didn't take off, everything changed. There was a blackout, for example, in the hotel or wherever the convention centre. Think about the speakers that must have been hanging around in the Gold Coast in the last few days, worrying about whether they were going to be able to deliver, or the people whose conferences were happening and the people weren't able to even get into those conferences. Ran into a speaker just a few weeks ago who had exactly that happen. And they literally had to delay their full day of training by 24 hours, which they were fortunately enabled to do. But imagine having 12 people fly in for an executive training day from all around the country, and the flights were suddenly not taking off. That's a big disaster.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they shut down all the airports here and all sorts of things. And look, I mean, things happen all the time. We all know this in business. It doesn't matter, what you do, you're going to run into stuff. In my case, okay, it was a cyclone this time, but, computers crashing is a great one. People don't have backups, so they lose all their files. Or getting to a speaking gig and your computer playing up and you have your files on your computer. You haven't backed them up to a USB drive so that you can actually at least get them off the USB drive, little backup sessions. I mean, as a firefighter, we talk about fallback plans, and I found that, I've got so many of these little fallback plans for speaking. If this happens, I'll do this. If this happens, I can do that. If we lose electricity, can I use a whiteboard or can I use a flip chart? Yes, I won't have my great pictures, but that's why I need good stories, because if I have some good stories, I can, I don't need the pictures as much at home.
Yeah. Which is really great thinking. And I've had this philosophy throughout my whole life. You've got to have a backup plan. And so I'm also quite cautious about things and plan well ahead. But the best laid plans will not always be the thing that gets you through. Sometimes you just have to take your hands off the steering wheel and say, let God, let whatever, and just go with the flow. And yeah, it's always when you least expect it or when you think you're so well organized. There's a great saying, apparently it's a Jewish saying, man plans, God laughs, which is really quoted by a favorite author of mine. And you just have to go with it and be grateful for whatever the lesson is in that. But what are some of the other things that that have gone wrong for people in the last few years as speakers?
Gosh, I don't know. Planes not leaving is always a good one. I mean, there's certain airlines here in Australia that I will not fly.
Yes.
Because their planes just don't leave. They cancel them all the time. They're always late. And so, I just won't fly those airlines. And most speakers know exactly who I'm talking about when I say that. So I don't even need to mention the companies. But that's a serious issue. If you're, I'm going to say, silly enough to fly the morning that you're speaking, you're asking to miss that gig. It might cost you more to stay there the night before and then fly home straight after the gig. I don't know. It depends on, what the organisers have organised or whether you're paying your own way. But it's absolutely worth flying the day before rather than the morning. So little things like that. I don't know how many times I've heard people say that I got stuck at the gate and almost didn't make a gig or didn't actually make a gig.
Yeah. Or I've come across times when the whole gig has been cancelled at the very last minute. Like literally a few years ago, there was, I met some great speakers that night around the bar, because some of them had literally already crossed through the international customs through to the other side of the airport and were not able to return back through the airport. They still had to get on the plane to come to Auckland after they'd left Sydney, the other side of the terminal. So they still had to come to Auckland. They still had to actually arrive, even though they got the message as they were waiting to board. So sometimes those sort of things happen. And what do you do?
I mean, I was supposed to speak in Christchurch a few years ago, and I was at one of the hotels downtown. It was all organised, it was all going ahead. Anyway, about 2 weeks before, the event needed to be cancelled. And I was like disappointed because I was really looking forward to flying there. Well, on the day that I would have been speaking in this hotel, the Christchurch earthquake happened.
Oh, wow.
And that hotel was one of the ones that was condemned because it half collapsed. So, sometimes cancellations can be good. But, when you've planned and you've got a speech ready and you've prepared all the other stuff, all the marketing stuff that goes with it, and your months of lead up, it can be really heartbreaking. Not to mention just the fact that, your income's tied to it. So, that's the other side. You're losing cash, and that can be really difficult at certain times.
And
So,
and like
backup plans again.
I think it's worth noting that by comparison, and this is the kind of thing that I've had to deal with more often, is when the books don't arrive on time. You know, having an earthquake strike or something, or a storm strike, is a lot bigger issue than not having your books turn up. But one of the things that I know frequently happens is that someone will say, I need to make sure that my books are there because I want to sell my books at the back of the room, or I've promised books to the delegates, or I'm giving away samples or whatever. If that doesn't happen, at least if you have a plan to make it available to send to someone online or get their details, send them a special copy, a signed copy when you get back, things like that. Those sort of things are resolvable, but you also have to factor those sort of things into your entire planning. So if you're doing a book and you think your book's going to be ready in time for a specific event, let's say, for example, we've just had International Women's Day. If you've been working on a book
Mm.
and you think your book's going to be ready to share with everybody for International Women's Day, and it's only launching in February, and for some reason it gets held up, the least you can do is say, I'll make sure that you have the ebook version, which I can make sure is available immediately. And here's the promise for getting the printed version out to everybody if that's what you want. There are ways and means of mitigating the issue or the risk. And sometimes we have to think right outside the box for that.
Yeah, because you just never know what's going to happen. Whenever you're planning something, the best laid plans, as they say, it doesn't matter what you do. Sometimes, just one thing after another will happen. Often it's the same thing that happens. It's really funny that I talk about, I have this thing where I hit the wall sometimes. It's like I'm trying to do something, no matter what I do, it's not working.
Mm.
And then I realize that I'm hitting this wall that I've hit previously.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things where you kind of go, well, last time I went round it, I went over it, I did all these things. But eventually you get to the point where you realize you've actually got to bust through the wall and for that problem to go away. And I find that's also something that's kind of tied into this sort of theme, because problems aren't always physical, as in outside of yourself. They're sometimes inside yourself too. So,
It's so true.
we go through these times in our lives as well that impact us greatly. And we try and deal with them by just working straight through them. And most people do, and they never really talk about it. They don't deal with it. And so they keep running into that same wall as time goes on in different forms, but it's the same wall. And until you actually sit down and work out what's going on and deal with it, you can't bust through it. And I think, a lot of speakers go through that. It's very frustrating. It can be very difficult sometimes when you think you're doing everything right and nothing is working. So, yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes it's internal and sometimes it's also external. For example, the issue that I was talking with someone about just this morning, where suddenly every now and then it feels like the tap turns off. Like there might be a global thing. Like I know at the moment with whatever's going on in America, share markets are hovering around up and down, gold price, Bitcoin, all of these things that we invest in, or whether we invest in our businesses, or suddenly we have a situation where there's a trickle down effect through a supply chain that means that we stop being, the taps turn off financially, whether that's going to be for a short term or a long term. What is the backup plan? What do we do? How do we make sure that the commitment that we've made to be available or to invest in our businesses or just even put food on the table? Sometimes you really, and this industry is one that's wrought with unexpected changes.
Oh, yeah. And the flow down effect you're talking about is so powerful. I was, talking to a business friend of mine, and, their organization relies on grants from other organizations to produce educational content. And suddenly, the money gets tight, and all those organizations just stop putting money into educational content. And so that flow on effect then is, of course, that they've got no money coming in, so they can't do anything. And it doesn't matter what they do, they have zero control over that. They just don't have any ability to make money. And so, while you can prepare for things, we talk about multiple streams of income and that, but even then, there's times when you've got multiple streams of income, they'll all dry up.
Yes.
And I always talk about keeping a bank, and I truly believe that any business needs a certain amount of cash in the bank And I talk about, generally to people, I'll say, 6 months to 12 months income almost
Mm.
sitting in there because of times like this. Business is cyclic. I know for me, Christmas time's dead.
Yeah.
And so I know for 2 months over Christmas, it's going to be very quiet. Maybe
Holiday
3
time.
months, maybe 3 months,
Yeah.
And so I know I need to make sure that I budget for that in my business. Otherwise, I'm not going to have any cash flow coming in. And so,
So,
it's just, that's just another hump, but it's part of the cycle of business and that we have to be aware of.
yeah, absolutely. And it's what those traps that are for the unprepared. The longer you stay in business for yourself, the more that these things are true. And people who go out on their own and suddenly decide, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to be a speaker, I'm going to be an author, I'm going to be someone who does workshops. There is so much to do, so many things. And people don't necessarily give you that advice about having the bank, the internal bank, having the backup plans. We thought today, for anyone listening, that this would be a really good opportunity because we've both had so many interesting things go wrong for us independently this week and this last 2 weeks, that it would be a really good time to actually say, you know what, the best laid plans, sometimes it's absolutely just a total cluster of errors.
Yep.
And just celebrate the fact that we survived these. For anyone that's watching this on video, you'll see a hole in the wall behind me. I've just moved into a new apartment and we just did some construction, and we literally got onto the call for Brad and I today, and he said, oh, you've got a wall behind you. And I said, oh my goodness, I don't know how to set this up very quickly to change my background, and we're using a platform that I can't just blur my background. So I said, look, okay, let's just run with that.
Yeah, exactly. It's not perfect. And, we're all in this business. We all know that, it's important, but, you can't always control your background. I see plenty of videos of people sitting in hotel rooms with the bed behind them, so it's just one of those things. It's one thing after another. And I think sometimes that, we talk about authenticity. I think it's a real thing, being authentic, sometimes just saying, look, stuff sucks sometimes.
Yeah,
Is really, really important, because we all put out this that, other people see us as on stage, all dressed up, looking great. And then the rest of our lives, we're like we are now. We're just, being people, getting on with our lives, trying to do the best we can do to grow our businesses.
and
And,
hiding the chaos.
this is the real me. I mean, I'm sitting here in a t-shirt because I normally wear a t-shirt, and I'm the sort of person. So, t-shirts are in, but, on stage, I'd normally wear a suit. That's my, I feel comfortable on stage like that. So, having broken walls behind us and not being able to get the cameras working properly or whatever, that's just another one of those things that happens. And it's going to happen when someone's paying you 20 grand for sure, not when they're paying you $5. It's going to be right when the big money's there. You're not going to be able to change your background.
Yeah.
And that's it, You just got to work with it. Either you pick up the computer and walk to another room and kick the kids out and go for it, or you just got to roll. And I think that's hard to accept sometimes, because a lot of people I meet in this business are perfectionists.
Yeah.
And look, it is what it is. You got to deal with it.
Yeah, you got to celebrate the chaos. I have a very good friend in the speaking and authoring industry who had to do a very big webinar with lots of people on it about 3 days ago. And she posted it on social media that she ended up having to do it from the bathroom, using the toilet seat as the platform for her computer in a hotel room, because everything went wrong with the connection or something or other. And it was the only choice she had. And she posted a photo of herself sitting beside the toilet with video on and a computer on. And that was the best she could do at short notice. And she made fun of it, and it was brilliant. And she said it was one of the best webinars she'd done. So I think we just have to celebrate the chaos that exists in our lives, be authentic, recognize that it's not always going to go to plan, and say, you know what, tomorrow's another day.
Yeah. Look, one of the things I had on my list of things is the to-do list is too long, and you're not getting enough done. That's another one, that I thought, because, life's too short to worry about it, quite frankly. You can only get so much done, and, maybe picking the most important things is the key way to look at it. But, it's just, one of those things. Life just throws it at you when you're least expecting it. And the worst bit is, I suppose, afterwards, it can take a while to get going again. And that's the
Yeah.
really hard bit. You're trying to go and your brain's not working properly. You're not rolling like you normally would.
Mm.
And you just need to take a little bit of time out maybe and relax.
Yeah.
Let your body get through it and your brain get through it, and then get back into it,
Yes, for sure. On that point, let's wrap this up because we both have some fixing up of things to do and to get through the
Yes,
next few hours
actually.
of each of our days. And just wish everybody else that's having either good days, bad days, or chaotic days, just go with it. Just take it as a gift and move on to the next day. And don't
Absolutely.
sweat the small stuff. And it's all small stuff. At the end of the day, it is all small stuff.
So thanks for joining Dixie and I on the Experts Journey. Got any questions or thoughts? Drop us a review or reach out. We'd love to hear from you. If you like this episode, be sure to like, subscribe and share. And if you need any help writing a book, see Dixie at indieexpertspublishing.com. If you want help with AI or online marketing, book a free chat with me at mrwebmarketing.com. We appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward to having you with us again soon.